BYU season comes to a close as they fall to the Alabama Crimson Tide, 113 to 88. Yes, I had to double check to make sure that was the exact score. 113 to 88. Season comes to a close. Cougs are 26-10 to end the 2025 season. Mitch Harper here with KSLSports.com from Newark, New Jersey. It was a tough night for BYU on so many fronts. Defensively, they could not stop Alabama at all. They couldn't slow them down. Alabama goes off 25 of 51 from three, only 15 attempts from inside the arc. Mark Sears, 10 of 16 from three. You know, BYU has been on the receiving end of individual spectacular performances in the NCAA tournament. I think of Gary McNamara, 43 points in Denver back in 2004. I think Josh Carter, Texas A&M, had a big performance. There have been guys on that have filled it up against BYU in this tournament. Mark Sears gets added to the list. And I'd also add, too, Aiden Holloway for Alabama. He was clutch, too. BYU got the deficit down to 7 after Moet Mag hit a 3 over here on the wing. And BYU was believing. I remember the BYU boosters and fans and corporate sponsors that were sitting behind me here courtside at the Prudential Center. They were believing. And there was momentum on BYU's side, and then Holloway goes down the other end and knocks down a 3 to put Alabama back up 10. I thought that was a huge 3. It was a dagger 3. Still, like, there was an opportunity for a run, but it just felt significant that any hopes of BYU making a run, Alabama was going to instantly respond. You know, BYU in the first half, their guard line did not show up in the first half. When you compare what Mark Sears did for Alabama, BYU's guard line was non-existent. Yegor Demon in the second half started to gain momentum. I thought Yegor, when he was getting downhill and attacking the rim, that's when he started to have success. And I thought Yegor in the second half played, pretty well. He finished with 15 points, 6 of 14 from the field, had 2 rebounds, 7 assists, only 1 turnover. Like, that's a solid stat line for Yegor. But that first half, it just wasn't impactful enough to keep up with Alabama and their tempo and their pace. You knew that BYU and Alabama was going to be an incredible, off-the-charts, high-powered offensive game. It lived up to that. BYU's offense did a really nice job scoring 88 points, but they just could not keep up with the Crimson Tide, who had a historic night. The most three-pointers made in an NCAA tournament game ever. They exceed LMU's record of 21 threes. Alabama knocks down 25. Richie Saunders had a strong performance offensively, 25 points, but BYU couldn't hit from 3. 6 of 30 from the 3. That's your ball game. BYU needed at least 12 to 13 threes to try to even keep up. I mean, I was impressed by the fact that BYU was only down 11 at the half after Alabama was already knocked down 12 threes in the first half. BYU only had 1 at the half, yet they were only down 11. You thought, okay, maybe the law of averages come into play and Alabama will cool off and BYU will start to find their shot from beyond the arc. That just didn't happen. The Cougars only knocked down 6 in the entire game. So it was a tough outing. They end in the Sweet 16. An incredible run for this team, but they just met a difficult matchup in the Alabama Crimson Tide, who go on now to face the Duke Blue Devils in the Elite Eight. It's going to be a late-night game here on the East Coast on Saturday, but that doesn't bother BYU. BYU now puts in the work to move ahead to year 2 under Kevin Young, and I will say year 1, a foundational year for Coach Young. He exceeded expectations. And look, there were lofty expectations for BYU basketball coming into this year. I have never seen an offseason with so much hype and buildup for BYU hoops than the one going into this season, but it's only going to kick to a higher level with A.J. Debinsa coming in to the fold for BYU next year, and he's going to be enrolling and starting classes on May 1st. He was in the building tonight here at the Prudential Center, and the roster construction is going to be fascinating. You lose Trevor Nell, you lose Fousseyni Traore, Moet Mag, Trey Stewart. They all were on the podium tonight, the 4 seniors that are departing from the program. But you bring back Richie Saunders, you bring back Keba Keita in the post-game locker room, very motivated to run it back next season, and as he put it, to be a leader of this BYU basketball program. So there's a lot of good pieces, and then you add Debinsa, but they've got to be active in the transfer portal and retool this roster for BYU to have success because, again, you saw some of the deficiencies, particularly on the guard line. They were not as dynamic as Alabama. I thought the second unit, Dallin Hall, it was an off night for Dallin. He really struggled for him. He had some turnovers in the game in the first half and just really seemed kind of all out of sorts. He had a alley-oop pass that floated away from the outstretched hands of Keba Keita, had some air balls. I mean, it was just a tough night, not only just for Dallin, but for the entire team. But you saw that the lack of dynamic playmaking ability was on display in this matchup against Alabama, and it was a tough deal for BYU. But next year there's only 15 roster spots. It bumps up from 13 to 15, but 15 total in the new rev share era of college basketball. So there's going to be no shortage of storylines for BYU hoops. We'll be following all of it, but I think better days are ahead for BYU basketball. Does it mean they'll be back in the Sweet 16 next year? You can't ever bank on that. It took 14 years to get to this spot from the last time BYU was here, but with the way Kevin Young's recruiting, he's going to have a lot more cracks at this thing than history would suggest for BYU basketball. But when you're here in this moment, you want to advance and keep the season going. They didn't do that tonight here in Newark as BYU falls to Alabama 113-88 to close out the 2024-2025 season. But safe to say, memorable season in year one under Kevin Young, and I think better days are ahead for Cougar Hoops going forward as they continue on in life in the Kevin Young era. So from Newark, New Jersey, I'm Mitch Harper, KSLSports.com.